Just thank you for Dr. Badron and the faculty of Miami-Dade College that have done so much for people in the communities and for this country. I'm going to tell you my story in 3 parts. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my personal story, my business story, and then because it's Hispanic Heritage Month, I want to share some new facts about Hispanics in America that may surprise you. Are you ready for that? Yes. Let me tell you my philosophy about life. Life is a journey, and it really doesn't matter where you start in life. The only thing that matters is where you end and how you deal with the adversity that you're going to find in between. It doesn't matter where you start. I started in the most poorest of places. It only matters where you end and how you deal with the adversity in between. Now, I was fortunate that I had my first bout with adversity at a very early age. You see, after the Cuban Revolution, my father's business was nationalized. He was in the grocery distribution business, and that business, after the revolution, was nationalized. So overnight, his business was gone. The revolutionaries that took over caused us to live in a constant state of fear and anxiety, and in fact, they took kids like me and told the kids that if you see your family, your mother or your father, doing anything against the revolution, you have to turn them in. And if they were found to do anything against the revolution, as you probably know, some people went to trial, some people went missing, there was a lot of bad things happening. So my family made the difficult decision then to leave the country and head for the United States, that beacon of freedom, hope, and opportunity that is this great country of ours. When you left Cuba in those years, just to remind some of you, you had to leave all your material possessions behind. You had to leave your house, your car, your savings account, every single material possession. They would do an inventory of your house, and if anything was missing, you couldn't leave. And those proceeds would go to the government, not to your family. So you had to leave essentially with the clothes on your back. We thought that was the most difficult decision that the family would have to make. So we got ready to go to the airport, myself, my mother, and my sister Barbara. When we got to the airport, the militiaman looked at our exit papers and said 5 words that changed my life and my family's life forever. And those 5 words were, "Only the boy can go." Only my papers were correct. The airplane was running. They had to make a decision to send me ahead by myself or keep the whole family behind. I was 10 years old. I don't know if you can ever think of having kids, but having to send a 10-year-old boy ahead to a country where you had no family. But my dad made a few phone calls, found friends of the family that had gotten to Miami just 5 months before that date, and told me, "Ralph, we're going to send you ahead. Don't worry, it's going to be like a sleepover. We'll be there in a couple of days. We're sending you to the greatest country in the world, the US of A." I got on that airplane. I said goodbye to my parents, and I wouldn't see them again for 4 years. So I found myself in a new country with a new family. I didn't speak a word of English. I didn't have a penny in my pocket. And heck, I didn't even like the food. The first food I got in this country was a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I looked at that sandwich, and I said, my dad says this is the greatest country in the world, and they don't put meat in the sandwiches? You know, a Cuban sandwich has pork and ham and all this stuff, and peanut butter. It shows you how difficult life became. But eventually, my parents did come over. I was thankful that the Baez family who took me in were serial entrepreneurs. And they started working in factories, but pretty soon they set up their own little factory making furniture, and they were realizing their own version of the American dream. So they taught me all I know about entrepreneurship, how important it is, and how you can reinvent yourself. So the first message I wanted to give to you is that it doesn't matter how difficult things get. Those days for me were so difficult that when people ask me, "Ralph, how difficult was it to merge AT&T Wireless and Singular Wireless, a $41 billion all-cash transaction, the largest in the history of this country at the time?" I say that is relatively easy. Hard is leaving your country, leaving your family, leaving your language, leaving your friends, and starting over. But the message to you is the human spirit is incredibly resilient. You can start life over and achieve your dreams. You can start life over and achieve your dreams. So let me switch now to when I went to high school. First of all, when I went to high school and when I went to school, there was no such thing as English as a second language. The only thing spoken in classes was English, and I knew zero. So after the class was over, I go, well, what did you say, teacher? Can you help me? Because but I don't know what, eventually some kids that knew a little bit of English and a little bit of Spanish helped me out, but there was absolutely no help. It was English cold turkey. And I knew I was really good at math, and I had to learn English. So when I went to see my high school counselor after my parents arrived, he looked at my grades. Math was good, English was not. And he looked at my family's finances. We had none. We had nothing. So he said, son, you can't be an engineer. You should go and be a mechanic instead. And there's nothing wrong with being a mechanic, but that was not my dream. I knew early on that I wanted to be an engineer. So I quit going to regular high school classes and enrolled in mechanic school. Until my grandmother, my abuela, arrived from Cuba. Abuela, my grandmother, was a mother to 7 children. She was a school teacher, a poet, and a pretty spunky lady. So when I explained to her that I was going to school to become a mechanic, but I really wanted to be an engineer, I'm not going to tell you the first thing she said in Spanish, but you can imagine. I will tell you the second thing which changed my life. And she said, Ralph, if you want to be an engineer, you can be an engineer. Don't let anyone put limitations on what you can achieve. I threw away that counselor's advice, went back to regular high school, and I graduated high school, and then I went to Miami-Dade College. And Miami-Dade College changed my life. This is the only place I couldn't afford to go to a 4-year school, and I had enough money saved that I could get into the Miami-Dade pre-engineering curriculum, which I did, and I'm so thankful, because without that, nothing else was possible. And so, you're here in Miami-Dade. My second message to you is my grandmother's advice. Don't let anybody put limitations on what you can achieve. You are in Miami-Dade. If you graduate from Miami-Dade College, you can do anything. Don't let anybody tell you you can't. You can. I did, and I'll show you how. You got that? All right. You're Miami-Dade. Say it. Yeah. Are you Miami-Dade? You're going to graduate? Yeah, that's important. So let me tell you why I call the book Obstacles Welcome. And a couple of stories. One about the time that I spent in Latin America. Then I'm going to give you a little bit of background on a small project that I worked on with Steve Jobs called the iPhone. So first, Latin America. When I worked for AT&T in Bell South, they always wanted to send me to Latin America because I was Hispanic and spoke Spanish. And I always refused. You know why? Because I never wanted to be known as a great Hispanic executive. I wanted to know me as a great executive who happens to be Hispanic. And so I turned down jobs in Latin America several times, so they sent me instead to Florida, Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, and Louisiana. I saw all of the South, and I learned from that. But by the time that I took my first assignment in Latin America, they named me president of Latin America's. Rick mentioned the 11 countries from Argentina to Brazil to Colombia to Venezuela. And when I assumed the responsibility for those countries, they were generating $2 billion worth of revenue, had 15,000 employees, and we served over 15 million customers. It was really a very fast-growing operation, but it had never made money. In the last 2 years, it had lost $200 million, and they said, Ralph, you have 2 years to fix it. I said, fine, sign me up for that. All my friends called me up and said, Ralph, are you crazy? That area is always full of problems. Don't take the job. Why did they give you this job? And I said, well, I don't view it as full of problems. I view it as full of opportunities. Now, let me tell you, it had a lot of opportunities that I'm going to share with you. When I took over the job, the first thing that happened in Argentina, which was a country that generated $1 billion worth of revenue for us, they had 5 presidents in 5 weeks. The economy turned upside down, and the Argentine peso at the time was the equivalent of $1. A peso equals $1. As soon as I got on the job, they devalued the peso 4-to-1. So now instead of running a $1 billion revenue in US dollars, I was running a $250 million company. Let me tell you, that hurts the business plan for the year right off the bat. So what happened is, we were trying to buy phones and pay for them in dollars, and then we were getting paid in devalued pesos. We would be bankrupt in a matter of weeks if we kept selling phones. We had to stop selling phones, which was not intuitive, but if not, the company would have gone bankrupt in 2 weeks. In the meantime, the government didn't want us to raise prices, and customers, were crazy. Retirees were, rioting in the streets. It was chaos in Argentina. In my second most populous country and most profitable, Venezuela, there was a coup d'etat attempt. I was actually in Caracas when Hugo Chavez was taken out of office. He was replaced by the head of the Chamber of Commerce. And in his first day on the office, the gentleman abolished the Supreme Court and the Constitution of Venezuela. A day and a half, Chavez came back. All the businesses went on strike. The shopping malls closed. There was no gasoline. I was running a modern-day wireless company, and we didn't have gasoline to run cars, so we had to get our technicians bicycles to bicycle the parts back and forth. That lasted for over a year. In Brazil, the joint venture that we formed with our partner took out $1 billion loan, and when time came to pay $375 million that was due in its tranche, our local partner defaulted and refused to pay it. So we defaulted on the $1 billion loan, and I had to renegotiate with 34 Brazilian banks at the same time. One of the toughest negotiations I've ever had to do. And then in Colombia, the rebels started blowing up our cell towers. Other than that, it was business as usual in Latin America. But you know what happened? Remember what I said at the beginning, the company had never made money, and they asked us to turn it around to have it break even in 2 years. We made money, net income positive in the first year, despite all those obstacles. Why? Because we put together a great team of people that overcame adversity. And that's the message of the book is, welcome obstacles. They make you stronger. It may be tough for a while, but the name of the book is Obstacles Welcome. That's a great example of how a group of people got together, and by the second year, not only did we make money, we made $250 million. We had lost $200 million in the prior 2 years. We made $250 in the next 2. In the third year, something happened that changed my life forever. Is we had a reporter from the Wall Street Journal follow me for a week in Latin America. There was no telling how that story was going to come out. He wrote for a week. He made up a story. We made the front page of the Wall Street Journal in a really, really positive story. And that jump-started my career. So if I had listened to my friends and had taken a safe assignment, I would have never made the front cover of the Wall Street Journal. So it says to you that it's okay to take a risk. It's okay to push yourself to where you're uncomfortable. In fact, if you're feeling uncomfortable, that's okay. You should start getting comfortable with feeling uncomfortable if you want to really achieve the best that you can in life. Last story I'm going to tell you, and I think we're making good time. I think we're going pretty fast here, is to fast forward to something perhaps you could relate to, because all of you have a smartphone, I assume. I wanted to tell you the story of how we got the iPhone exclusive from Apple. I, at the time, was the CEO of AT&T Mobility, and But before I tell you about the iPhone, the moral of the story is there was an actual phone before the iPhone that you probably never heard of called the Rocker. R-O-K-R. Any of you probably never heard of it, right? Well, the Rocker was the first phone that had 100 iTunes songs in it. And it was put together by Steve Jobs, Ed Zander, who was the CEO of Motorola, and myself. We thought there was a future in putting music in phones, and that was the first attempt ever to put iTunes songs on a phone. And we thought in those days, 100 songs, man, how could you, 100 songs in your pocket, that's got to be pretty good, right? And then the Nano came out, it got 1,000 songs on it, right? And so we marketed that phone every way we could, and it was a failure. It didn't go anywhere. It was a market failure. The marketing and the advertising was good, but the phone factor itself, made by Motorola, was not very good. So after that experience, and how Steve saw how we worked together as a team, he decided to build his own phone. Keep in mind, in those days, Apple's not the Apple you know today. Apple had never built a phone. All they had built was computers. And so Steve called me up and said, would you like to help us build this phone? I need to get to know how the radio and the things work inside the phone. Not the user interface, which was great, but how to make sure that the phone actually worked and sounded good and had the right radio frequencies built into it. So he invites me to go to Cupertino, and he says, I want to show you some prototypes, but you have to sign a non-disclosure agreement that you will not tell your board, your CEO of the company, your wife, your children. In fact, you cannot tell a soul. So I go to Cupertino. Keep in mind, this is early on. And so he shows me a phone that looked more like an iPod, and I go, Steve, I don't think this phone looks very good. Well, that's what we're going to build, okay? So I go away. I don't tell a soul. Then he calls me back several weeks later, says, hey, I've changed my mind. Come back. I want to show you a different model. And then he shows me the real thing. Now, he's never told me, but I think he was testing my integrity. He was testing whether I would tell anybody that he was building a phone that he was not planning to build. And it shows the importance of adhering to your word, being credible, being trustworthy, and having integrity. It makes a difference. So the first time that I was one of probably the first 4 or 5 people in the world that saw the iPhone. And if I take you back in those days, it had a touchscreen. But touchscreen phones in those days were so inaccurate that you had to have a stylus. For those of you that maybe remember or have read history since you're very young, in those days you needed a stylus, a little pen that you would, pick the actual spot because a finger was not accurate enough. So as soon as he handed me the phone, I said, well, where's the stylus? He just says, this is the stylus. He raises it in his finger. I go, oh, show me. So he starts moving this thing. I go, well, this is going to change the world. This is absolutely, and he showed me the whole phone. So I go back, and my boss says, what's it look like? I goes, I can't tell you, but it's going to be great. And we actually signed that deal without our board ever seeing the phone. We bet that Steve Jobs would be able to deliver the phone. We signed a multi-year agreement with Steve, and we ushered in the smartphone revolution. So here's a young kid that gets to the U.S. by himself, without his parents, without speaking the language, and yet is doing a deal with Steve Jobs that changes how we live, work, and play. And I could only do that because I am a Miami-Dade college graduate. Education matters, and I think you're going to get a great education here. But you know what I learned more than anything else in Miami-Dade? I learned how to learn. Because today, things are changing so fast that by the time you graduate and you spend 2 years out of school, things are going to change. If you don't keep up with that change, you'll be obsolete in 2 to 3 years. With the changes that are happening with artificial intelligence, machine learning, blockchain technology, there's a whole world of change going on. And in fact, I would caution you to be careful. You don't get a degree in something that is very routine, because things that are very routine are likely they're gonna get mechanized and it'll be done by robots in the future, for sure. So having a great education that can help you land the right jobs is a really, really important aspect. So we've got plenty of time then from now to jump to my last subject, and then I'll give you an opportunity to ask any question at the end. One of the most important things that I've discovered in leaders and in organizations is the importance of doing things that are fact-based. When I make decisions, I like to have facts to guide my judgment. Opinions are welcome, but facts really, really matter. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't take some subjective actions into account, but you should start from some base of facts. But there's a danger when you have learned a set of facts that you think are true, but they're no longer true. If you are running an organization and a business based on something that you learned a while ago, and that while ago guides you, but it has changed, it is the worst possible situation. I've seen leaders get derailed. I've seen organizations go completely under. I'll give you the best example of that following on the iPhone. BlackBerry. I knew both the CEOs of BlackBerry. They were some of the smartest people in any room at any time. But they had convinced themselves that people would not type on a slate, that they always would need a physical keyboard. And it took them 5 years after the iPhone was released to issue their first all-touch screen phone. By then, it was too late. Apple killed them. They stopped making phones, and now they're focusing their business on software. Both of those two leaders were fired, and a new person brought in. Why? Were they not smart? They were super smart, super smart. But they held something that was no longer true, is you, especially young people, were willing to type on something that didn't have a physical keyboard. And they held that until the company went under. It's a great story. So why am I telling you this? Because I'm going to share a new set of facts. And I hope that you take the old set of facts and crumple it like I did that counselor's advice and put it behind you. This is new research about the impacts of Hispanics and the impacts they're having in our country's economy, on education, and on entrepreneurship. Now, let me tell you where the source of the data comes from. It comes from Stanford University, one of the most respected universities in the country. It comes from the Pew Research Center, one of the most respected organizations that does research. It comes from NERA Economic Consulting, and it comes from the U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics, just to name a few. I did the research. I put all of this together, and I'm freely sharing it. It'll be available to you if you want to download these infographics and share them with other people. I actually hired, after I did all that research, I hired a company called Statista. That's a global statistics firm to verify that the assumptions and the things that I used were correct. They're a global firm. They checked every number, and in fact, they liked the number so much that they're publishing it on a worldwide basis because they liked the work that was done. So the first thing I want to talk about is the impact that Hispanics are having on the U.S. economy. This chart over here shows you the actual gross domestic product as a measure of economic growth. The gross domestic product of the 55 million Hispanics who were here in 2015 is $2.13 trillion. Now that number by itself doesn't mean anything, but when you compare that number to other countries, it's startling. If Hispanics were a separate country, inside the U.S. economy, its GDP would be larger than Canada, it would be larger than Brazil, it would be larger than Italy, it would be larger than India. And in fact, it would be the third fastest GDP in the world behind China and India. Why is this happening? Well, this is just the tip of the iceberg. If you look at the cohort of those 55 million Hispanics, the numbers are astonishing. The average age of those 55 million in 2015 was 28 years of age. By the way, that includes me. I drove that average way up. 28. The average for the U.S. population is 43. So Hispanics are much younger. The 55 million in 2015 are expected to grow to 106 million by 2050. Now here's another statistic that may surprise you. When I say those numbers, people think, well, it's immigration. Not correct. Between 2010 and 2015, U.S. Hispanics grew 6.3 million. 5.1 of the 6.3 were born in the U.S. They're citizens of the U.S. 1.2 of growth came from naturalized citizens. Those were people that were naturalized. So 6.3, 5.1 were born here. 1.2, what happened to the rest? Well, Hispanics that are non-citizens between 2010 and 2015 actually went down by 600,000. So the growth for Hispanics going from 55 to 106 has got nothing to do with immigration and all to do with the young population that are in the prime childbearing years, when the rest of the U.S. population is kind of in a different cycle, past their prime years. This is huge, and it's needed in the country because the baby boomer generation, for people like me that are retiring at the rate of 10,000 every day, we need to replace those people, and the young population of Hispanics and the future growth of the U.S. are inextricably linked. Inextricably linked. And it's not immigration that's driving this. You can look, all these charts are available in my website, ralphdelavega.com, and look under my latest advice. You can download these charts. I'm providing them freely so you can share and get rid of the old facts and put in the new facts. Now here's another interesting statistic. If you can give me the next chart, please. Latinos 16 to 24 made up 2/3 of the labor force increase in the years 2010 to 2015. But even more interesting than that, look at the number of Latinos that are serving in military or service organizations. 18.6% are in the military, and almost 26% of the Marine Corps are Latinos today. That number really, really surprised me. I didn't realize that the Marines had over 25% of Latinos, which is way over-indexing in the population. So Latinos are contributing to the economy, and they're serving our country where it matters most, serving in the military. Let me have the next chart, which talks about education. This is an amazing chart. If you look at the high school dropout rate for Hispanics and the college enrollment rate, the high school dropout rate is at an all-time low, and the college enrollment rate is at an all-time high. Now, the high school dropout rate is still too high, but it went from 34% in 1996 to 10% by 2016. The average in America is 7%. So we still need to get below 10 is too high, and I think 7 is too high. 72% represents, in 2016, Hispanics that graduated in June, 72% were enrolled in college, just like you are, by October. The average for non-Latinos is 69%. That number really surprised me, but it's institutions like Miami-Dade that are allowing you to get enrolled and to get some of the best education that money can buy. The key is you have to graduate. You got this far, guys. Don't drop out. The dropout rate is still too high even when you enroll in college. So I'm just showing that you're here, you've got to finish it. And then you've got to keep learning your whole life. But education matters. It changed my life. And I guarantee you it will change your life. This actually shows you the different breakdown between K through 12 and other statistics. You can see actually that the student debt is actually very low for Hispanics versus the rest. And I think it's institutions like Miami-Dade that can give you a great education that is affordable. I know that when I went here, I drove a beat-up Volkswagen. I was so poor that my windshield wipers broke and I couldn't afford to replace them. So if it started raining, I had to pull over. I mean, it was just that. That's what it took. I could only drive in fair weather, but it got me through Miami-Dade. When I finally traded that car in, the VW dealer made it into a Herbie 53 and raffled it off. It was in such bad shape. Let me have the next chart. Now, entrepreneurship. Something amazing is happening with entrepreneurship. I mentioned that the family that took me in were serial entrepreneurs. The bottom line is Hispanics have the highest rate of entrepreneurship, of starting new businesses, than any other segment in the country. The number of Hispanic businesses doubled between 2002 and 2012. But what really surprised me, what really blew this out, is that 50% of the growth of Hispanic businesses were being done by Latinas. Hispanic women make up 50% of the business growth, which is amazing. There's a whole generation of women that are coming around and they're making a huge impact in business. And they're just getting started. You can see the rates of entrepreneurship. Let me have the last chart. Look at the numbers on the bar charts on the left because I think they're really amazing. This is right after the recession of 2008, what happened to Hispanic businesses in 2008 and 2009. Businesses grew 46%, sales receipts went up 35%, and employment went up 22% when every other thing for the country was kind of tumbling down. So it really highlights that if you look at the gross domestic product and the impact on the economy, if you look at what Hispanics are doing serving in our military, if you look at what Hispanics are doing in educating themselves, and if you look at what they're doing in terms of entrepreneurship, we are following exactly the same path as every immigrant history that has made this country great. Just like the Germans, just like the Eastern Europeans, just like the people from Spain, just like the people from Ireland, every other group, we're following in the same path that has continued to make America the greatest country in the world, bar none. You know, when America was in its infancy, there was a gentleman that came over from France called Alexis de Tocqueville. He wrote a text at that time, Democracy in America. The French wanted to find out after the U.S. was formed, how was democracy working? And Alex de Tocqueville wrote this wonderful treatment, but what he said is what this represents. He says, America is different than the aristocracy of the days in Europe, where it was very class-ridden. There was a very hierarchical thing, and you had to play your role. In America, everybody felt equal. In America, everybody could start anew, and they could achieve their dreams. That was true in 1831, and it's true today. And it becomes true today if you stay in school, and you graduate, and you make the most of it. I want to end by saying one more time that I feel fortunate to have had an opportunity to attend this great institution. I would not be here had it not been for Miami-Dade College at the right time, at the right place. So I've tried to work to pay it forward by working with Junior Achievement Worldwide, which teaches young kids about entrepreneurship, financial literacy, and getting ready to enter the workforce. And we reach 10 million kids in 123 countries worldwide every single year. I also work with Boy Scouts because the Boy Scouts teach kids great values. We may not know this, but 12 men have set foot on the moon. 11 have been Boy Scouts of those 12 men. And the reason I got started with the Boy Scouts, it started right here in Miami. I saw a kid who had been a gang member, and I saw the before picture, and I saw the same kid when he got his Eagle, which is the highest rank a Boy Scout can get. And it was like this kid had been transformed. So I worked hard to transform as many of those kids as we could. And the best example of that, in closing, is a kid from Pittsburgh named Nathaniel Green. Nathaniel Green was getting his Eagle, and they invited me to speak at his ceremony. I met the young man, and it's the most incredible story I've ever seen. Nathaniel Green is an African American. He was born a crack baby. He didn't eat solid food till he was 3 years old, raised by his aunt, and he was getting an Eagle. It was so cold in Pittsburgh, I thought nobody would come, but it was a sellout crowd. This young man was just so impressive about all the adversity that he overcame in life that you can't put a price on how Nathaniel Green's life and his family's life has been changed forever. Just think about that. Going from a crack baby to an Eagle Scout. So the bottom line is the human spirit is incredibly resilient. You can't start over and achieve your dreams. And especially if you go to Miami-Dade and you graduate from Miami-Dade, you can achieve anything. Thank you very much, guys. So great. You know, they say sometimes you can't go home again. I disagree. It was great to come home again and to see so many bright young people in the audience. It reminded me of what I went through many years ago that completely changed my life and made me the person I am. So my message to them was essentially if you graduate from Miami-Dade, you can do anything. I'm living proof of that. Stay in school and graduate. You're going to have a great life because you're a Miami-Dade College graduate.
And some things are unimaginable to me, but it's inspirational to know that someone else who has it worse than I have has been able to live through all of this and been such a successful person and overall happy and satisfied with this life.
I actually learned a lot. I learned as an immigrant myself, I could be who I want to be and strive for my dreams and achieve my goals.
I'm Grayson Palacio. I'm a second-year marketing major. And my question to you is, being someone that plays a major role in a company and really high up in the company, what would you say is the most important thing to prepare for in a role like yours?
You know, I think the biggest thing that a leader has to do is to make sure that they ground themselves and they become their authentic self with a set of values that they can feel will guide them to do the right thing. I often get asked what leadership qualities I look for in a person, and the answer may surprise you. The first thing I look for is not their IQ, the school they went to. The first thing I look for is, do they have integrity? Because without integrity, you will lead people the wrong way. And I don't want to work with anybody that doesn't have the greatest degree of integrity. So I always try to focus not on the disciplines, but on the values that make you the person that you really are. Because if you're running an operation in 11 countries or 200 countries for me, you're going to be 10,000 miles away. I want you to do the right thing for the company without me having to tell you what to do. Integrity means, to me, doing things the right way, in a legal way, and credibility means that you do what you say you're going to do. If you have integrity and credibility, you build trust with people because you know they're going to do the right thing, and when they tell you that they're going to do something, they do it. If you work with people who don't have integrity and who don't have credibility, you're going to be in trouble. In fact, I would suggest you should get out of that organization, and if it's the company, I'd leave the company because you're going to end up in a bad place. All you have to do is look at the stories every day that show up on people doing things that are unethical. And I'll tell you how I learned about integrity. I learned it the first week on the job. When I came here, I had to promise my mom that I would do nothing wrong. She said, "We're going to send you, Ralph, but don't you do anything wrong. Make us proud." I said, "Mom, I will." And when I first got on the job working for Bell South at the time, I was an engineer, but they gave engineers a side little job when you went home. They wanted you to check something you probably don't even remember what this is. You remember the old coin stations where you would put a dime in and you could make a public phone call? Well, you had to go and check to make sure all those things were working right. First week on the job, I go, "I can do differential equations. I think I can check the coin stations. Yeah, give me that." And so first coin station I go to, I put in my coin, and all the money comes out of the pay station. I mean, it's like I hit the 3 bananas in Vegas. Everything comes out. Now, I have a beat-up VW that doesn't have windshield wipers. I have a college loan that I have to pay off, and I have all this money. And I thought, what would my mom do? I said, I took every one of those coins back and gave it to my supervisor. I said, "I don't know what happened, but I'm not supposed to have these, so here they are." I went back to do my engineering job. He comes back 2 hours and he says, "Son, did you know those coins were marked?" I go, "Marked? What?" "Oh yeah, they have this ink that when you shine a light on them, they can tell they're marked, and they're purposely set up to test the integrity of the coin collectors, and you walk right into it. If you had taken those coins, I don't have to fire you." Integrity matters. Integrity matters. By the way, the other things, that not just those two, but I think in business is a team sport. So I think being a good team player is something I look for. Having the right attitude. A positive attitude is a huge force multiplier. And then I look for excellence, somebody that wants to come in and do the job tomorrow and the day after better than what we did the day before. And finally, somebody that has vision, that doesn't just think about today, but is thinking about how I can make things better in the long term. That's what has led me to success, and those are the things that I look for in leaders and that I emphasize. I call those the things that I look for that are not on your resume. I can look at a lot of resumes, and I've looked at a lot of resumes in my career, but what I look for to hire people is not on their resume. It is integrity, it's credibility, it's teamwork, it's attitude, it's excellence, and having the right vision. And I can call around a lot of people and ask them questions. You'll never probably see those things on the resume, but believe me, they're the ones that really, really make a difference. It's a great question.
Hi, my name is Ruslanka. I admire all your core values. I understand them, but through your journey and through facing all your adversities, what books did you read along your way, and what could you recommend?
I just put out a list on my website. If you go look at ralphdelavega.com, I put my top 10 books, and I put some oldies but goodies, and I put some recent ones. Some of the more recent one is Homo Deus, which talks about the future of mankind. Sapiens is also on that list. But when you talk about the basics, I like the one question that we should always ask, which is Fred Reichheld. It talks about the Net Promoter Score, which I used at AT&T. And by using the Net Promoter Score, AT&T has ranked #1 in retail satisfaction 9 times in a row until I retired. I haven't kept up with it recently, but that's a pretty good indication that it actually works. I like Michael Porter on strategy, for example. There's a whole list. If you go look at those 10 books, they're books that I have read, and I'm a voracious reader, by the way. I think that's why it's so important for you to leave school, but not think that your education stops. It continues, and to the extent that you can read, whether it's on your iPad or your tablet or in a real book. The book that actually caused me to do the infographics is one that I highly recommend. It's called Factfulness by Hans Rosling. It's a short, first of all, it's short. It's full of facts about the world, and he has a very optimistic view. But what he points out in the book is that most people have the facts wrong. So he took newspaper reporters, He took economists and he gave them a set of questions. And then he compared their answers to the same set of questions that he gave a group of chimpanzees. And the chimpanzees beat the newspaper reporters and the economists on some facts that, if you look at the World Economic Forum, they can show you the actual facts. But it really highlights how important it is to have facts, and how even the most learned people today get them wrong. And they get them wrong not because they're trying to do something wrong, it's because they learn something that is no longer true. So if you have to read anything, I would recommend read Hans Rolling's Factfulness. Take the test, because he'll give you the test. You can actually take it. I think I did a little better than the chimpanzees, but not a whole lot better. It inspired me to write the stuff that I did with the Hispanic facts. So that's a really great question. You're welcome to download the list and the infographics.
Hello, my name is Samir Raza, second year at the Honors College, majoring in political science. And my question is, what advice would you give to your younger self?
You know, I think I lived a pretty good life. If I look at my life, I don't know too much that I would change. I think if there was any advice, it may be to perhaps don't go as hard as I did early on, and spend a little more time smelling the roses. But when you get here as an immigrant, you're just fighting for survival. I mean, it was brutal, and I learned that, I don't know what you call it, attitude, survival instinct, stayed with me my whole career, and that's why immigrants play such a key role in here. I should have probably slacked down. Let me give you a quote from Steve Jobs, a good friend who passed. And when he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, he was still working. And I said, Steve, why are you working? Why aren't you doing something else? And he said, because this is what I love to do. And I'll never stop doing it until I pass. Now that, you have to lead a full life when you have to say something like that he feels so good about what he has done that he didn't need to change it. After I retired from AT&T, I've thoroughly enjoyed retirement. I retired from AT&T, but I didn't retire from life. But now, because I saved during the time that I was working at AT&T, I'm financially stable. I don't need to work. I only do the things that I want to do now. So I get all these incredible offers. Ralph, you're going to make an obscene amount of money. You got to do this thing in Eastern Europe. We got this great opportunity in Africa. And I go, not doing it. But you're going to make a lot of money. It's not about money. Money doesn't buy you happiness. You know, once you get a basic subsistence, you don't need to focus on anything but that which I want to do. And so I said, I've lived a life well planned, and it's worked out for me. It began with Miami-Dade College here, but that's what I would have to tell you, is that I feel good about where I'm at. I couldn't feel any better, and I'm helping people, and I'm only doing things that have a good mission in life. I'll give you one of those examples. The group that I'm running now invests in small startups. And there's a small startup called Rapid SOS. So why did I invest in Rapid SOS? And why am I helping them serving on their board of advisors? Because what they do is, when you pick up your mobile device and you call 911, today the location of you having that 911 call is very inaccurate. It may think you're across the street. If you're inside a building, it can't see GPS, so it doesn't know you're on the second floor or the building number 3 in this conference room. But a young group of kids, they look like you. They just came out of college, has figured out a way to transmit, when that call goes to the 911 center, surrounding information like your IP address, if there's a Wi-Fi access point here. If there's GPS, it will use it. It does a number of things, And then when that gets to the 911 center, they can locate you within about 3 meters. That's really good. That helps people, and that's why I'm investing in them. So those are the kind of things that really jazz me up when young people have an entrepreneurial attitude and they innovate. Young people, I think, don't see the obstructions that others that may have had a longer time looking at this. So for 60 years, we've been triangulating to get a location. These kids have found a way to do it with software, and it is simply amazing. And by the way, they're giving that information free of charge to the 911 centers. Then they're planning to make money by other services that they're offering using a similar concept. So they're giving the location. In fact, Apple is one of their customers now. And I think by the end of this year, maybe early next year, I know every Apple phone, Google has signed up, so Android will get the same thing. When you call, Apple will be first. When you hit 911, you're going to guess the fastest and most accurate location where you're at. For your safety, that's really important. You're going to get it both on Android and you're going to get it on Apple devices.
Hello, my name is Armando Barbosa, and I'm a computer science student. And my question to you is, did you ever have any pessimistic thoughts about the business world when you first landed your engineering job?
That's a good question. I'm an optimist at heart. So, let me tell you why. First of all, optimism can be learned. But let me tell you how it came to me. I started to be a pessimist when I found myself in this country without my parents, without any friends, with a family who didn't know where its next meal was going to come from. And I knew all my friends were back in Cuba. They're having their toys, they're having their families. And I said, is it something that I did wrong? I couldn't talk to my parents because we couldn't afford to call Cuba. The calls were expensive. You'd write a letter. Sometimes they would get it. Sometimes they would not. So I was basically incommunicado for 4 years. And I said, is it something that I did that caused this to happen? And after thinking about it, there must be some force from up above that said, you know what? All you got to focus is on the positive side. You're right, your parents are not here. You're right, your friends are with their parents, but you're with a loving family who's taking care of you like if you were their own son. So you now have 2 mothers and 2 dads, and you're in the greatest country in the world. How could that be a bad thing? So it changed from me trying to blame myself and becoming a victim to becoming an optimist. Because if you let the situation drag you down where you become a victim, then you lost the fight. And there's some kids that came in similar circumstances that I still meet them today, and they still didn't get very far in life. They felt they were a victim of the situation. Never let yourself be a victim of the situation. Nobody can put limitations on what you can achieve, like my grandmother said. So always think of the positive thoughts. And it's really important for young people, whenever you grow up and have your own children, to make sure that you don't let anybody put limitations on what they can achieve. I spoke to a group of about 20 kids near Chicago several years ago. And one of the things that we asked them to do was to write their business card. Put in it what you want it to be when you grow up. And some would say they want to be a lawyer, some wanted to be a chef, some wanted to go to law school. And then they wrote me letters and said, thank you for speaking to us, because that's what we wanted to do, but they told me I could never go to Yale, I could never be a lawyer, I could never be a chef. And these are like 10, 12-year-old kids. And you go, why would anybody tell a young kid who wants to go to Yale they can never go to Yale? Why would they tell a young kid if they wanted to be the CEO of a company? It can't be. This is 20, I got 20 letters that broke my heart. So I sent them a copy of the book. And then I got one letter back. I forgot these are young kids, and they thought the book was fiction. I go, but I have my picture in the book. I have my mom in the book. I have my abuela in the book. How could it be fiction? Well, we just thought the story was too good. So it really highlights the importance of telling young people at an early age that, yes, they can do it. And by the way, what Junior Achievement does is it teaches young people how to run a business at an early age. We teach them entrepreneurship by having the capability to have them serve as CEOs, CMOs when they're in their teen years. So we teach them how to run a company. They have to show the business plan, and then they have a panel of judges, not too dissimilar from the Shark Tank, that question them on this stuff. If you have a kid who was the CEO of his or her company at 13, don't you think they have a leg up to be the CEO when they get to be in their 20s and their 30s? I think they do. The final thing, and you'll get a kick out of this story, that we teach them is about financial literacy, because a lot of kids are going through school, they leave school and they don't know how to balance a checkbook, they don't know how to put a budget for their home. And so we have a course that we teach where we bring kids in middle schools and we teach them how to do finances. And then they come in for a day in a room like this, maybe as many as you have here, and they play a role. They play the role of a family member. And I still remember this young lady who got her role. She came from a well-to-do family, but the role she had to play that day was to be the head of the household. Her husband was out of work, and she had a 2-year-old son. This young lady from a well-to-do family looked at the finances and said, "This is not fair." You go, well, that's too bad, but we're not changing the role. That is the role. The head of household, the husband's out of work, and you have a 2-year-old son. Anyway, she gets through the thing, learns her lesson. They put a microphone in front of her face and said, "What did you learn today?" Her answer, I still cannot lodge from mind. She says, "What I learned today is don't marry a deadbeat." Now that, if you're a father or a mother, is precious, right, in one day. But that's what we teach kids. There's a question up here in the front.
My name is Bumi. I'm an international student. I'm doing business studies. I'm doing my degree in business studies. I think you've really inspired me today. I can feel you because I relocated from England to here with nothing, with not knowing anybody, so I can relate with you. But we need people like you. I don't think you should retire yet.
Thank you very much. I'll have to tell my wife, who has a different opinion. But thank you very much. Here's the 4 reasons why I've succeeded. Number 1, I have a mother who took an incredible sacrifice to set me ahead. I had a grandmother who gave me the greatest advice that I've ever had. I had a second mother who took me in as the Bias family, who was equally, she still spends times with me, months with us at a time, and I have my wife. With 4 Hispanic women, guys, you can't go wrong.
We have just been treated to a truly, truly inspiring talk by Ralph de la Vega, alumnus of Miami-Dade College, and let's give him another round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you.
I know that each of you here today has been able to take at least 1, probably 2, probably 3 pieces of very important guidance and information, truly inspired by Mr. De La Vega's journey, his charisma in talking about his life, and truly challenging each of you to strive for the stars and to let absolutely nothing get in the way of you realizing your dreams. So on behalf of Miami-Dade College, the 165,000 students, on behalf of our faculty, Mr. Ricky Caraballo, our chairperson of the School of Business, and the 50,000 students here at the North Campus, we'd like to present you with this certificate of appreciation and this very small but gratitude, this token of appreciation.
Thank you very much. Thank you.